And this will be recorded. So Karen, can you make sure we've got this recorded? Okay, thank you. The gist is we put these videos on basically our webpage as documentation, as the discussion and so forth. We really didn't get a whole lot of feedback from the prior RAC meeting, but Karen did redistribute kind of the updated rules and so forth as of Monday. So we're going to kind of reintroduce ourselves, kind of take roll and kind of go through discussions in that. So that being said, I'm definitely here. I hadn't seen Jesse. Is Jesse online?
I'm on. Good morning,
Okay.
everyone. Jesse O'Brien, Policy Manager with the division.
Thank you, Jesse. And Eric.
Good morning, Eric Bredesen. I'm the Property and Casualty Product Regulation Manager at DFR here. Thank you.
Excellent. And is Teddy on? About Tricia or Aaron? Or Cassie? Moving to Spencer. I think I saw him on. Is David on?
Yes, I'm David Dahl, a Property Casualty Actuary.
Okay, excellent.
Spencer Peacock is here as well. Sorry about that. Spencer Peacock, Business Analytics Team.
Excellent. And then looking at external RAC members from APCIA, is Danny Ritter on?
Hi there, Denny Ritter here.
Excellent. And Brandon with NAMIC.
Hey there, Brandon Vick.
Excellent. And Kenton, are you available and online?
I'm here, present and accounted for. Thanks for hosting the meeting. And good to see you.
Excellent. Glad to be seen, Kenton. I worked quite a bit on the Washington adoption of rules in prior life on kind of these same disclosure pieces, and I know Kenton was involved in that as well. Sean, are you online?
Yeah, Sean's here, American Property Casualty Insurance Association.
Excellent. Angela.
Yep, Angela Donnelly here, Oregon Consumer Justice.
Excellent. And Joel, are you on for United Policyholders? How about Michelle?
Hi, Michelle Drews from the Oregon Consumer League.
Okay. And how about John C. Powell?
John is here.
Excellent. And TJ? How about ISIS?
Yep, Isis Thornton Saunders here with PIAO.
Great, thank you. And then kind of moving to some of the interested parties, is Chris Coughlin online? Or Mike Eliason?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent. And Jennifer, are you online?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. And Montana?
I'm online.
Okay. And I'm not sure the other John Powell is online or not, but got him on the list as well. Excellent. So just like I said, we're kind of reforming, trying to fill in for Scott. He's been kind of under the weather, so we wanted to keep things going through. We did not get a whole lot of feedback between the gaps between the first meeting and then what we'll be discussing now. So Karen, if you could bring up kind of the proposed draft rules. We'll kind of walk through some of the changes. I don't want to go through necessarily line by line because a lot of that was already dealt with in the first meeting. Of course, we still need to figure out what the rule numbers are going to be, but this is all going to be based on the statute recently adopted. And so we kind of go through and talk about House Bill 2563 and kind of filling in that the carrier is obligated at renewal of putting some sort of statement on the renewal notice that basically says consumers have the right to request information regarding a rate change. This is very similar to what is required in Washington State. And also the NEIC has basically a general statement, kind of very similar, that was adopted by EX and plenary of the NEIC in their Denver meeting this last fall. So kind of look at the fact that Connecticut and Indiana are also looking at doing something very similar. So Karen, if you can scroll down to kind of the next update that we have. So here are definitions. Again, by rule, we can define when a factor significantly contributes to a premium increase. We've been kind of talking about, is it exceeds 2% or whatever, but basically we're looking at, is it one factor or is it four factors, but not more than four factors that might be contributing to a rate increase. We didn't get any language that talked about or had a different explanation of kind of where the 2% was. So we didn't really make any changes to that. We just basically said a factor that significantly contributed to the policy premium, be it that, your kid basically rear-ended a car, you had a claim on your house, you had a theft claim, maybe there was some sort of renewal. The carrier noticed that your house has 9 cords of wood right against it, and it's a cedar house with cedar shake, and you're under pine trees in your own wildfire area, any sort of thing that might contribute to that. So all that being said, any comments about kind of what I've already brought up? Ken?
Hi, thanks, John. So I think the trades had submitted some comments in writing, but I'm confused as to whether or not they have been seen or reviewed. And I'm just going through through my sent box to see if they got sent in. But on this topic in particular, and we can resend those in to make sure that you've seen them, we had a couple of we had some questions and seeking some clarification, and even had some language suggestions on the premium change notice, but mostly really, which we can get into more later, but mostly just around the idea of making clear on the insurer's side that if there's only one factor that is contributing most significantly, that only one factor has to be listed. And I do see in the premium notice itself, premium change notice, that it says if less than 4 factors, only list the 1, 2, or 3 factors as appropriate. I think that's a change from the original version. I'm not sure, but that's helpful to know that that's been responded to. So, and then I have some other stuff regarding the premium change notice language itself, but it appears that you've attempted to address those concerns in the redraft.
Absolutely. That's kind of the goal. Big picture, I'm not really seeing premium declining, especially when I look at some of the loss ratios for carriers and so forth. So by and large, we're going to have premium increases. It may be just overall inflation, or maybe to factors where, there had been claims reported or underwriting considerations, things like that. So good to know. Any other comments on this before we move on? Okay, Karen, next page, please. So this is the premium change notice contents. You can see here that in the blue, I'm sure that your premium is impacted by all but not more than the top 4 factors. Again, could be one, could be, you had a significant car wreck, you had a house fire, you had a theft, what have you. If less than 4 factors significantly contributed, only list the 1, 2, or 3 factors as appropriate. And I hope that is the landing page you wanted, Kenton. And again, which will cause the price of your insurance to increase at renewal. And again, this premium change notice, is going to go out and also would provide an explanation for the reason for the premium increase. So it needs to be kind of clear, kind of the topics that I talked about. So Brandon, you had a question, sir?
I did, and sorry to go backwards on you a little bit regarding the 2% threshold in the earlier section. In that letter that I just forwarded Kenton to make sure he had, we did just address that as believing that was lower than necessary. And we're hoping to stick somewhere near the 10% that was in the original bill, but obviously didn't make it to the bill that was passed. So just wanted to raise that again. And again, we'll get you that letter if it somehow didn't get to you the first time. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay. And Michelle, you had something? You had a question?
Yes, it's related to comments we submitted and the actual notice language that's deleted regarding the very real possibility that insurance premiums may increase in the future. I see that's been deleted. I guess I'm wondering why, as that will help, I think, stop questions from consumers.
Yeah, and in this case, because the statute's basically talking about what increased at renewal, not necessarily what's going to be, in the future. Future could be electronics. It could be a whole bunch of things that I wish we had crystal ball on. It may also be a function of the investments, the economy. There's a whole laundry list, I guess, of things that could potentially impact. And then, of course, what could consumers do to minimize that impact is kind of a range of functions too. From, people could take driving courses. They could basically wildfire proof their houses, a whole litany of things. But the actual statute was pretty much defined by just the premium increase at time of renewal, if that makes any sense. Kenton, you had another follow-up?
I do. Thanks, John. And so a couple things in the language I wanted to point out, and then a question. I'll start with the question. There may be circumstances where none of the factors add up to made a 2% difference on its own, but all the factors combined together resulted in a premium increase that has caused the consumer to contact their insurer rather. So I'm not sure that there needs to be a change in the rule language, but there may need to be additional, maybe so. I'm just not exactly sure because I'm not exactly sure how to address it. But in those cases, the insurer may need some guidance on how they are supposed to respond if none of the individual factors are 2% or greater. So that's one thing. Secondly,
yeah, absolutely.
In the language,
the base rate could just go up, right? For everyone.
Right. And if it's acceptable to just say, the base rate we filed with the state of Oregon for premiums went up, and that's the answer. If that's all there is, it'd be helpful to be clear that that's a sufficient explanation.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you could have circumstance where, that's the trend if you follow. And so I'm not necessarily seeing losses decline for carriers. If you follow, a lot of cars are having more electronics, especially the EV space. Those sensors in the front end of your car, they require basically computer technicians to recalibrate. So it's not like the old days where you could just pound out the dents and put your clear coat, repaint, and Bondo or whatever, and call it good enough. So, Michelle, you had your hand up.
Yes. One of our comments had to do with the prior RAC and what happens in the event that an error is discovered, that the premium increase, there was an error, and that's why there was a premium increase. And I don't see that addressed here.
No, and I appreciate the comment though, because if you kind of think about, okay, the premium increase, so it comes out at the renewal notice, that basically the consumer has the right to request information. Okay, well, as the consumer would write a letter or an email or use their app, whatever technology is provided, and send it to, you know, XYZ insurance company and said, hey, can you explain further why my premium went from $1,000 a year to $1,500 a year? That provides then the carrier the chance to respond. You know, what are the top four factors? Well, it could be too that maybe they didn't catch the fact that your kid should have gotten the good student discount, but they didn't process the good student discount form, if you get where I'm going. At which point they, you know, recalibrate and so forth. I think somehow or another that could potentially get captured in this because the consumer is in fact requesting information about the change notice. There could be other things too, as far as, you know, there was a renewal or whatever, or maybe inadvertently they didn't use the rates that were supposed to be filed. Well, now that's going to be a different issue because maybe that impacts more than one or two people. But I think by having this premium change notice, that allows people to basically check and re-verify, hey, did they get all the discounts maybe that they should have gotten? I hope that answers the question.
It doesn't.
Okay.
So, I mean, I just think something in here needs to say that a consumer still gets a response in writing, indicating if after the investigation is done to determine what were the factors, and if the factors were an error, that the consumer still gets a response in writing, telling them that there was an error.
Okay. Appreciate the comments. Kenton, you have a follow-up?
Yes, thanks. I want to give some thought to what I believe it's Michelle has said, because I believe insurers have to respond to errors anyway in premium, and they have to, you know, they have to correct premium under existing, you know, statutes and regs. But I want to look into that some more and be thoughtful about responding to it. With regard to the language that's in the premium change notice, we have to remember that this is a notice that's being provided at the request of a consumer who's already been notified of a premium increase at renewal or an upcoming renewal. So the renewal is in process unless the consumer does something different to change the course of that renewal. And so some of the language that's in the notice kind of conflicts with that idea and seems to conflate informing someone of a premium notice with informing them why they're receiving the premium increase. As an example, in the first bullet, it says, as you requested, we're notifying you of a premium increase. That's not accurate. They've already been notified of a premium increase. What we would suggest, and I can provide this to you in writing, just as a suggestion, this should say something more like, as you requested, we are providing additional information regarding the factors that contributed most significantly to the premium increase applied to the above caption policy. So that's one thing. And then secondly, in the second bullet, it says, the premium is impacted by, and then it provides instruction for the insurer what to say. And then the last phrase of that section, that second bullet says, which will cause the price of your insurance to increase at renewal. Remember that the premium increase has already been applied and the renewal is already in progress. So this portion of the statement should be deleted or modified to reflect that fact. You could replace this bullet in the notice with something like, your premium increased at renewal, and these are the factors that most significantly contributed to the increase in your premium. And then you could go on from there into the other bullets that specifically list the factors.
Yeah, appreciate the, you know, you're talking about, is it, you know, future tense or present tense or past tense, I guess. So,
yeah,
you know, as you say,
yeah, exactly.
This is a response
not a
of
notice to inform people of the increase. They have already received the increase. They're asking for more information about why their premium increased. This is responding to that request.
Excellent suggestion. Isis, you had a comment?
Yeah, thank you. Again, looking at the premium change notice language here, with the additional language in the second bullet that clarifies the factors, the number of factors the insurer has to list, it might be helpful to also include that language in the third bullet where it's saying the provide a clear and reasonable written explanation for the top 4 factors that significantly contributes, just to be consistent along those lines as well.
Appreciate it. So basically, I don't want to copy and paste per se, but basically the same criteria applies to bullet 2 and 3. That's your perspective, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And then you'll note that we did omit where it says, please note your future premiums may increase or decrease if you change your coverage, because you know, we're talking about a statement at renewal. Kind of as Kenton says, these are activities that have already taken place. And so we're trying to not conflate it with what may or may not happen in the future. It certainly is advised, though, if you have questions that you contact, you know, either your insurance agent or the insurance company, depending on what that perspective is, and then at whatever that telephone, email, or contact information is. Any thoughts about that?
This is TJ. Are the agents being included in this letter?
Well, this would be coming out from the company. So, you know, it kind of comes back to, this is a kind of an example, but you know, what would that loop look like, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Agents should be CC because we're going to be the first line of defense, or the first line of trying to explain to the client.
And absolutely, and I've had that same circumstance where my insurance producer will contact me and say, hey, John, do you know why your rates went up? And it's like, well, yeah, it took me some to figure it out, but I would kind of hope that my own agent would know what that is or be afforded that opportunity. But that was, again, kind of the circular thing that had been occurring, you know, somewhat in the past, where sometimes the producers were completely flat-footed and the customer would call their agent and say, hey, do you know why my rates went up, you know, umpteen %? And the company wasn't necessarily providing the information to the producer. So I totally appreciate that. Joel, you have a perspective?
Yes, and I appreciate the changes Kenton has been suggesting, kind of to make this more well, comprehensive and understandable. Well, one thing I would mention, since this is already requiring an action on the part of the consumer to ask these questions rather than providing an initial explanation. You know, this is a person that obviously has inquired because they are concerned about their premium here. And it seems like while you're doing this letter, it might be valuable to include things the consumer can do to reduce their premium, rather than that being a separate whole action, right? To be responsive to what the real concern is. My premium's getting high. You could also be telling them, here are things you might be able to do. And, you know, whatever those are, they could be increase your deductible, you know, something about, you know, the usage of the car. If you're not using this car or in this way, for example, for commuting, make sure, you know, you have it classified correctly, or something about your home that you can do, for example, right, in terms of some mitigation actions that can get you a discount. It's a shame to go through, you know, providing this kind of information without going the whole way and saying, you know, you're worried, ultimately you're worried about your premium increase. Here are some things you can do about it as well.
Appreciate the thoughts. Kenton?
Thank you. I just wanted to respond a little bit to Joel's comments, which I appreciate. I think one of the benefits of what could be a complicated rule and statutory change that we all in the industry certainly worked on with the department over the last year is that it could result in, more conversations between insureds and their insurers or their agents, producers, about ways to impact their premium by the very kinds of changes that you're suggesting. I don't think we'd want to see those kind of requirements inserted into this rule because they're not called for in the statute. And it's also tricky to say in a regulatory environment exactly precisely what an insurer or agent is supposed to say in the rule and how they're supposed to respond. But I do think that the result of this, I think one of its goals is to encourage people, if they have questions or concerns, to contact their insurer, ask for more information, and presumably that will initiate a conversation either directly between the insurer and the insured, or the insured and their insurance agent about those things. I've certainly had it happen to me personally, and I think that's one of the goals, is to get people to have. I mean, if more people would call and ask about their insurance policy, once a year, at least, just to find out what's covered and what's not covered, that would be a great start. But also, whatever it is that prompts that conversation, I think those things are going to come up in the course of those conversations anyway.
Yeah, if I can add to that, John, on what Joel had suggested, I think that would be really difficult to list in this premium change notice, all the factors. Or, but again, I agree with Kenton and Joel that I think that communication, and one of the things I know at the bottom, you talk about questions, contact your insurance company. I mean, maybe, and I'm curious to see what the producers think, but, obviously contacting your agent or producers to talk through some of those options. Some of the options may be obvious, and I think but then there's a lot of them that may be pretty difficult to list here. And not knowing that you would actually get a discount or a premium decrease if you did them. So I think having that conversation, and maybe even adding that, if the producers are okay with that, to work with their agent and the insurance company to have those conversations. But listing them, I think, would be very difficult in this notice.
There are so many different rating factors that get brought into, the rate these days. 30 years ago when I started, you maybe had 6 or 7 different rate factors. And now you've got, 100 plus different things that can impact the rate. It's not, a credit. It's married people are statistically less likely to be involved in a serious accident than single people. So getting married changes your rate factor, and it's not a marriage credit on your policy. It's just tweaking the factor a little bit.
You
Well, and
should
not to
suggest people
completely
do
go
get
off
married.
on a different
Yeah.
tangent, but the NEIC, when they were discussing this, they kind of had almost a shopping list of all the different potential scenarios, and it became multiple pages, which I'm not sure. I know, my spouse, when she sees renewal things, it automatically goes to me because she's not quite even sure what it is. So, but the statute's pretty clear that it says, basically the consumer's got the right to ask the question, why did my increase go up, and do so in writing. And then that would allow them to start asking the additional questions that's pertinent to them. Could they get a multiple policy discount? Things like that. Otherwise, we just kind of have this prescriptive list where, a whole bunch of items may not necessarily apply. I'm not necessarily sure how then we're in alignment necessarily with the statute, but the NAC did try to do it, and they were kind of going in circles on that, and then finally kind of said, no, we'll just kind of circle it back to either the carrier or the producer in their transparency notice that was basically recommended for states to look at. Jolie had another thought?
Yeah, just on something we passed over right there is it says if you have any questions, contact your insurance company. And I guess, you know, it was just mentioned, it should possibly be your agent or insurance company, depending on if you have a direct writer or independent agent company.
Mhm.
To get, that's where you would discuss what can I do to get some
Yeah,
discounts.
that's what I
or,
was
you know.
suggesting too. If that's something that, you know, again, depending on the situation, you may, you know, prompt that conversation to figure out how you can benefit from figuring out those, you know, what you can do to change some of those factors.
Absolutely. And again, this is basically kind of a draft type, because a carrier is free to make some changes to modify it for their perspective. But the question is, well, hey, if the carrier is going to submit something, could you provide an example, maybe to kind of, you know, what that is? Yeah, I've dealt with some carriers specifically through their app, their phone app and chat box and things like that. So there are different communication strategies, portals, and so forth. And I didn't want to start having to list, oh, well, email, postal, website, chatbot, at AI. Yeah, you kind of get that perspective, but it's up to the company to kind of say what that place for intake and discussion is going to be. Is it at the producer level, or do they really want you to call?
That makes sense.
Yeah. Kenton.
I guess I'd also just noticed, thank you, that the language of the rule at the outset says that the following format, contents, or something substantially similar. So insurers do have the option to add some language in there. I don't see any reason off the top of my head, not having heard from members specifically about this issue. I don't know why there would be any issue with adding language that says or agent or something similar. But just wanted to note that there's nothing stopping an insurer from adding that as long as the department approves the language of the form the insurer is using.
Absolutely, Kenton. Yeah, well, the idea is just how do you get the conversation going? What's that intake look like? And yeah, we don't want to be so prescriptive in saying, oh, well, it's got to be this channel or another channel. That's why we, you know, something similar. How do you get that language across? Any other thoughts, folks? Okay, let's roll to the next page then, Karen. Okay, so we made a couple changes to data reporting. So as you see on sub 3, each insurer meeting the premium threshold, which is the $1 million premium, must report to DFR by 2028. So the initial draft had 2027. The rule would actually go into effect September of 26. So you wouldn't have a whole lot of data if it was going to be submitted April 30th of next year. Well, 2027 anyway. So they extended it. And then the other discussion that was brought up at the first RAC meeting was, is it every year, or, after the first year, is there going to be some room to maybe reassess? And so you'll see there in the blue line, the thought process based on feedback from this group was to do it every other year. So as it would be here in the draft, 2028, 2030, 2032, if that makes sense. And then sub 3A, we made a tweak where the renewal policy renewal offer was made during the reporting calendar year where the renewal term premium was greater than the prior term premium. Again, did it go from $1,000 for premium year to $1,025? Like I said, I'm not seeing a whole lot of renewals where there's a decrease, but it could be if people are removing coverage types, things like that. And then 3B B, total number of policyholders from the group A above that submitted a written request for explanation for the premium increase that expressed as a percentage for each policyholder. So these are kind of the data reporting. Keep in mind, the market conduct annual statement gets filed by a number of carriers where there's premium more than $50,000 for homeowners or for private passenger auto. So we have a pretty good idea of the number of covered events, be it homes, dwellings, or auto already. We're just trying to hone in on the policyholders that might have expressed that they want an explanation. So, Joel, you have a question?
Yeah, we did at United Policyholders submit a comment here. To me, so this could be a judgment thing, but it appears that to some degree this is looking at the value of this notification in a sense, because you're saying you want to collect data on how many premiums went up and how often did people make an inquiry, in accordance with the possibilities here from this bill telling them they have some options. And I would say on any given year, probably every homeowner's policy increases, if not because of a rate change, but just because of the inflation factor on the limits. And generally, most automobile policies do go up some percentage. And if you're measuring the impact of this bill in terms of providing people the opportunity to ask questions, it's going to look like a very tiny percentage of people submitted a question as compared to the number of increases that went out. So I don't know if that is the particular point of doing this, but it seems like, what you should be measuring is where there were rate increases, not just premium increases. That at least takes the inflation factor out of the equation, right? For example, in homeowners, every policy essentially goes up because of the inflation factor on the limit, but you might not have taken any rate increase. So it's kind of looking like, well, only 0.1% of people that had a premium increase inquired, but it'll be a much higher percentage of people who inquired who received a rate increase. And I think that would be a better measure of the value of this bill in giving people this opportunity of getting a notice or being able to inquire like this. So it's just flipping to an actual rate increase, not just any policy where the premium goes up.
Yeah, appreciate the comments, though. I'm not sure the average consumer would see a difference. They just know it's gone up, and so they've got the right to inquire.
No, I'm just saying, if you counted every policy where the premium goes up, which again would be virtually every homeowner's policy, and then you looked at the number of inquiries, you go, wow, hardly anybody inquired, but as a percentage. But if you only measured the number who inquired versus the times where the rate increased, you'd show a higher percentage of inquiries to rate increase that way. It's just a measuring of the impact of this bill, rather, because the other way, where if you're only measuring the number of inquiries for all the policies where the premium went up, which was solely due to inflation, not due to a rate change, it's going to look like hardly anybody inquired. It's just how you're measuring the impact of this opportunity to inquire about the rates.
Absolutely. Michelle, you have a question?
I'd also like to ask, is there a possibility of actually gathering the actual numbers of requests versus just a percentage? Again, I feel like that percentage number, I don't know, is a little harder to wrap your head around versus getting the actual numbers of consumers that, request the reasons.
So this is Jesse. I think that in various kind of version control related issues that this item got a little bit garbled, because I think the idea was that it would be the number of policyholders, and then we would also want the want information about what premium increases those policyholders had inquired as a result of, if that makes sense, and that would be expressed as a percentage. So that's kind of two separate data points, because part of what we are interested in is understanding, what are the characteristics of the consumers who take up this option.
And Kenton, you have a thought?
Yeah, just kind of adding on to what Jesse said, I think that language is kind of clumsy because I think we were all confused when we saw it as well. It sounds like what you're suggesting, what you're looking for in that language is, one, how many policyholders took advantage of the opportunity to ask for more information, and two, what was the average premium increase that those policyholders experienced. Is that accurate?
Yeah, from my perspective, that would allow the correlation. If you had a significant rate increase, you would have probably more of an uptake of people inquiring, but also provides additional data. Kind of turn it around on another side. I know from a market conduct perspective, people go, oh, well, company X had a large number of complaints, but it might be tied to premium. So if premium is going up because you've got more policy holders, and so overall aggregate premium is going up, you could expect complaints to go up. But then just because you have a complaint doesn't necessarily mean that the company's done anything wrong. So the idea is, can we get some base data, and some of that's going to get collected in a form, kind of be discussed later, as to what are these data values are that explains what is actually going on as far as context, without it being super overburdensome for carriers to complete, if you follow what I'm trying to get at. That get back to your perspective then, Kenton?
Yeah, I think so, but I'm going to just say, and we can respond in writing to this draft and maybe suggest some language that's clearer about what data is actually attempting to be collected here. Just thinking out loud, I'm not sure that I'm not sure what specific value there is in getting the information about the percentage of increase for the policyholders. I mean, it's an interesting data point, but is it going to change the direction of what the rule does, or what I'm not sure what it informs, other than to answer a question that people might just be sort of curious about. So is the juice worth the squeeze on that? I'm not exactly sure, and I'll want to check with my members about it from our perspective.
Absolutely. Appreciate the feedback. Joel?
Yeah, I think I agree with Kenton on that last comment. It is, I think the issue, and as kind of a bigger thing, is it would be better, of course, when there's a increase of a certain percentage or more, to simply proactively explain for every policyholder what were the drivers of that increase at the time of the issuance of the renewal. And so, instead, this is, a post, you've gotten your renewal, and you have a question, and you submit it, and you get a response, and then tracking how many people took advantage of this, which is, it's a good thing. But it just suggests to me that we should be looking to give more information out at the time of renewal directly to all policyholders, to inform them of what is happening so they don't have to inquire, give them the knowledge up front so they can deal with it, before the renewal potentially, for example, as opposed to this process, which is going to take some period of time, inquiry, response. What can I contact your agent or the company then to see if you can do anything? It'd be nice to prompt that earlier in the whole transaction with the initial renewal notice.
All right.
Just a
Appreciate
comment.
the input. Any other thoughts? Okay. So if folks could put in some of your thoughts potentially in writing. I'm not sure, Karen, if there's a good date, like a week from this Friday, if that gives people enough time to, kind of provide some feedback, because I want to actually be able to incorporate some of this for, incorporation of our next steps. So we're kind of move on then to our opportunity for public comment. Is there anyone else that isn't part of the call that wanted to provide some additional information? Any other thoughts? Okay, then we'll move on to next steps with Mr. Jesse O'Brien.
Yeah, hi everyone. I don't necessarily have any elaborate next steps thoughts to share, but I did want to just say, as people know, Scott Klemke had been leading this work, and he is going to be out on medical leave for an indefinite period of time, which is very unfortunate. Hopefully he will recover and return soon, but I think we're going to move forward on the assumption that John is going to be leading the effort until we at least get to the point of being able to propose the rules. One thing I was uncertain about coming into this meeting is whether we were going to need to have another RAC meeting or not. And I do think there's enough, we've gotten enough feedback, and there's enough points of discussion that people are, I think, planning on following up on, that we should probably plan on having one more meeting, but I actually do think we're pretty close here. So I'm hoping that we can schedule one more meeting and then plan on being done. And of course, that would not be the last opportunity to weigh in on the topic, because there will be a public comment period and a public hearing on the rule. But I do think we're relatively close to wrapping this up. I hope that works for everyone. I know that industry is anxious to get this resolved so that the programming and other types of implementation work can get started on their end. So we're hoping to wrap this up expeditiously.
And Jesse, we'll need to talk about the statement of fiscal.
Yeah, excellent.
Yeah,
excellent
I had forgotten about that about a few days ago. So yeah, we'll need to talk about the
I mean, many of you are familiar with this already, but with a proposed rule, you have to complete a document called a Statement of Need and Fiscal Impact, which we affectionately refer to as a SNIFI. It's standard practice to have a discussion with the RAC about what should go in that document, so we can do that at the next meeting. But in preparation for that, people should think about ways of characterizing the the impact of the rule on businesses in the state, especially small businesses. That's a particular interest of the legislature, and something we're required to speak to in SNFIs. Obviously, the rule doesn't directly regulate any small businesses, but we do need to address that. But also, impacts on insurers and other entities needs to be covered there, as well as the impact on equity in the state across different kind of lines of identity, that type of thing. That's something that SNFIs are required to address as well.
And Karen, you had a follow-up?
Yes, and I do want to apologize. We did receive quite a few public comment. And they are listed. I wanted to show everybody. They are listed on our rulemaking webpage. And so I believe these are the letters that folks were talking about that they had written in on after our first RAC meeting. So they are there.
But yeah, if you've got additional follow-ups, we can get it from a week from this Friday, that would be appreciated. That way we can incorporate that into if we're going to be doing any minor language changes or whatever. And as Jesse points out, for additional discussion in the future, that would be appreciated. That way we can make sure it's distributed to everyone, and everyone's got a chance to see what other folks are saying. Anything else for the good of the order? Going once, going twice. Well, thanks everyone. I am filling in, so I'm trying to make the best I can to try to get the process going. So I apologize for some people going, okay, maybe this wasn't the smoothest transition, but what I'm trying to do is find a path forward so we can get this implemented. You can get back to your normal work that's already in progress. So thanks again for participating. Certainly enjoyed the conversation. Take care.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.